Good evening, viewers. You're watching Mission 2024. I'm Preeti Chaudhary, and with news coming in, source-based though, seeming to suggest that it might just be Mission 2023 as well. There is a possibility that the government could introduce One Nation, One Poll bill in the upcoming special joint session of Parliament from the 18th September to the 22nd of September. You could call this nothing short of a political earthquake. We're going to get you details. First up, taking you through the headlines. Big India Today political news quake. Sources say Modi government may table One Nation, One Election bill during special parliament session from September 18th to 22nd. Rahul Gandhi takes on Modi government over fresh allegations against the Adani group. Rahul demands JPC probe, questions why Prime Minister Modi is silent on the issue. Top focus as well at 7 p.m. Rahul and Sonia Gandhi in Mumbai as India allies gear up for a two-day meeting in the financial capital. BJP slams opposition bloc, calls it alliance of Majboori. ISRO releases new set of Pragyan rover images. Pragyan seen rotating for a safer route as lander's camera captures rover movement. Well, this is good news. Indian economy expands at its fastest pace in a year. Growth rate clocks in at 7.8% in April-June, beats China by a large margin. Suspense over whether China will attend the upcoming G20 summit, with news agency Reuters claiming Xi Jinping deputy will attend instead. India and China yet to confirm Xi's absence. More big changes to X. Elon Musk announces videos and audio calls as latest X feature. Musk says no phone numbers required for X calls. All right, the big scoop coming in on the joint parliament session. Crucial bills to be introduced in the special session. Sources say One Nation, One Law bill also to be tabled. Sources also insist women's reservation bill to be tabled as well, which has been hanging fire for decades now. Parliament special session from 18th to the 22nd of September. It's all set to be explosive now. Three bills that could be tectonic when it comes down to India's political social narrative. Number one, the government is mulling to introduce the One Nation, One Poll bill. That would mean that all elections will take place simultaneously. However, that would require a constitutional amendment, not just as easy as introducing a bill, but the big scoop also coming in that the government is contemplating to introduce the women reservation bill as well as the UCC, One Nation, One Law bill. Quickly cutting across for this news break to my colleague Himanshu joining us. Himanshu, तीन बिल जो अगर कह सकते हैं इंडिया का पॉलिटिकल सोशल नैरेटिव बदल सकते हैं।
देखिए, बिल्कुल ये बिल जो है बिल्कुल पॉलिटिकल नैरेटिव जो है सरकार का वो बदल सकते हैं, और इन बिल के आधारों पर ही जो है 2024 में क्या मुख्य एजेंडे रहेंगे ये तय हो जाएगा। और विपक्ष जिस तरीके से एकजुट हुआ है उसकी काट के लिए सरकार की तरफ से ये दो बिल लाए जा सकते हैं। एक वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन, दूसरा वुमेन रिजर्वेशन बिल। प्रीति, जो वुमेन रिजर्वेशन बिल है 2009 में यूपीए सरकार लेके आई थी, राज्यसभा में ये बिल पास हुआ था। तब तमाम कई दलों ने उसका विरोध किया था, जिसमें आरजेडी के विधायक थे, जेडीयू के विधायक थे, एलजेपी के साबिर अली ने विरोध किया था। तमाम लोगों ने विरोध जरूर किया था, लेकिन तब भी ये बिल पास हुआ था। लेकिन लोकसभा में खुद कांग्रेस के कई सांसद इस बिल के विरोध में थे, और राज्यसभा के अंदर और बीजेपी की भी कई सांसद जो हैं उस वक्त इस बिल के विरोध में थे। तब इस बिल को लोकसभा में नहीं लाया गया था, और उसके बाद से ये बिल जो है अलाइव जरूर है, लेकिन भी सरकार ने, चाहे वो यूपीए की सरकार हो या पीएम मोदी की, ये दोनों बिलों को जो है वो कभी भी नहीं लेके आई। लेकिन प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी कई फॉर्म से ये बात बोल चुके हैं कि वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन जो है वो होना चाहिए, और इसको लेकर खुद चुनाव आयोग ने भी बैठक बुलाई थी, ऑल पार्टी मीटिंग
जिसके अंदर ये कहा था कि सभी पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज को इस पर जो है वो ध्यान देना चाहिए कि किसी तरीके से जो है वो वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन होना चाहिए, जिससे जो है देश का जो समय है वो बर्बाद ना हो और देश जो है वो एक साथ आगे रहे। और सभी असेंबली इलेक्शंस के कारण कई बार जो होता है देश का विकास रुक जाता है। इससे विकास जो है, विकास की गति जो है वो स्लो नहीं पड़ेगी, विकास की गति एक साथ होगी, क्योंकि देश में कई बार ऐसा होता है कि एक साथ देश में कई 5 राज्यों के चुनाव होते हैं, कई 2 राज्यों के अलग अलग समय में चुनाव चलते रहते हैं। एक साल में 2 या 3 बार ऐसा होता है मौका जब चुनावी मौसम होता है, तो उससे देश के विकास की गति धीमी पड़ जाती है, देश के जो रिसोर्सेज हैं वो डाइवर्ट किए जाते हैं। तो ऐसा मानना था प्रधानमंत्री का, और प्रधानमंत्री ने ये बात खुद पार्टी के फोरम पे भी, राज्यसभा में भी ये बात कही थी, और इलेक्शन कमीशन ने भी इसको लेकर ऑल पार्टी मीटिंग बुलाई थी। सभी पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज की इस पर राय जानने की कोशिश भी की थी।
बहुत शुक्रिया हिमांशु कि आप हमसे जुड़े। आई कैन ऑल्सो से 9 summers ago the Prime Minister had reiterated on one nation, one poll, but is it going to be just as easy as introducing the bill? Quite not. We're going to break it down. But first up, I want to also take you to the other story that we're tracking very closely right here on India Today. All right, we're going to get our viewers more, but the latest that we're also getting in a fresh set of allegations against the Adani group of companies. The Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project has said that millions of dollars have been invested in some publicly traded stocks of the Adani group through opaque Mauritius funds. While the Adani group has rejected all allegations and called the report a concerted bid by Soros-funded interests supported by a section of the foreign media to revive the meritless Hindenburg report. Congress MP Rahul Gandhi in Mumbai, where he is to attend the India meet in Mumbai, took on the government, took on the Prime Minister over the fresh round of Adani allegations. Rahul raised the Financial Times report demanding a JPC probe against Adani, claiming over $1 billion were taken out of India, circulating outside and brought back to the country. Rahul also demanded that the Prime Minister break his silence and investigate Adani.
That money to capture Indian assets, at the very least, the question of course is, why is this one gentleman who is close to the Prime Minister of India allowed to move $1 billion to pump up his share price, to use that money to capture Indian assets, airports, ports? Why is there no investigation taking place? It's very important that the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, clears his name and categorically explains what is going on. At the very least, a JPC should be allowed and a thorough investigation should take place. I don't understand why the Prime Minister is not forcing an investigation. Why is he quiet? Why doesn't he say that he is going to make sure that this issue is investigated and the people who are responsible are put behind bars? This is raising a very serious question on the Indian Prime Minister just before leaders of the G20 are coming here, are going to be our guests, and they're going to be asking the question, what is this special company? This company that is owned by a gentleman close to the Prime Minister, why is it that in an economy like India, this gentleman is being given a free ride?
Studio with me is Siddharth Zarabi, Managing Editor, Business Today Television. Siddharth, will you, for our viewers, break down the fresh round of allegations that have just come up where the Adani Group is concerned, and how different or similar are they to the Hindenburg report?
Well, 8 months ago, the Hindenburg report was massive. It led to a, at its peak, $100 billion erosion in the market cap of the Adani stocks. This, in comparison, focuses on 2 individuals and 2 entities which are accused to have acted in concert in some ways with the Adani Group, the promoter group, and purchased shares of Adani Group companies via overseas offshore entities. And the 2 individuals who have been named are said to be acting in concert with Vinod Adani, who resides overseas, The sum of money that is alleged to have been invested at its peak, one of the numbers is $430 million, but this is around 2016-17, and the allegation is that money was in some ways linked to the Adani empire, was reinvested in Adani companies, and the allegation therefore is that it is illegal and amounts to stock manipulation. There's one clear thing as far as the report of this entity OCCRP is concerned. That report does not provide any details and says there is no evidence that this money actually came from the promoter group, because that is the crux of any allegation, but it shows and claims that it has documents which show that they acted in concert in a coordinated manner with the Adani promoter group. I think if you were to compare it to Hindenburg, it takes one or 2 points, especially the point of foreign entities and what they have done. And I must remind our viewers at this stage that the market regulator SEBI has told the Supreme Court that it is still awaiting information from 5 nations, tax havens as they are described, with regard to almost a dozen entities to determine who was the actual economic owner, beneficial owner of those entities. So that information is not available with the Indian regulator or the Indian Supreme Court, and therefore these allegations add to that particular aspect a bit more. Preeti.
Right. Siddharth, just very quickly, I'll come to you on this once again before I let you go. So right now, is there a clear money trail which we were speaking of? Number one. Number two, what does Adani Group have to say in all of this?
The whole thing would depend on whether if this were to be a violation of the law, if these two people, one of whom is actually a Taiwanese national and not a Chinese national, whether they acted on behalf of the Adani promoters. The Adani Group has come out with a strong statement. It is calling all these allegations recycled, and they say that these have already been discounted, are old sort of repackaged allegations which have not been found to be true. So we'll obviously have to wait for how this pans out. Remember, the Supreme Court is still seized of the matter, and we will get to know more once further hearings take place.
All right, Siddharth, appreciate you joining us. Thank you there. Siddharth Zarabi, Managing Editor, Business Today Television, breaking it down on what is this fresh round of investigative journalism that has seemed to have unearthed another big or an investigative piece when it comes down to Adani. Hindenburg 2.0 is what we're calling it here. All right, with that, I want to quickly move on to the big story that we've been tracking so very closely, which broke right here on India Today First. The big scoop on the Parliament joint session, which is being called. Crucial bills will be introduced and considered in the special joint session. Sources suggest One Nation, One Law bill also likely, Women Reservation bill also to be tabled. But most important of it all is what everyone has their eyes turned on, which is, will the government go ahead, and sources insist that the government right now will go ahead and introduce the One Nation, One Poll bill in the joint session of the Parliament. I want to cut across to get a larger picture and understanding, because this will require a constitutional amendment. I want to quickly bring in the top constitutional expert of the country, PDT Achari, who's joining us live on this big news break. Mr. PDT Achari, sir, appreciate you joining us. What is coming, sir, source-based though, that seem to suggest that the government is mulling to table a bill which is One Nation, One Poll. What could be in terms of the constitutional amendment, or what would it take to actually go ahead with a bill like that?
See, I feel that there is no constitution amendment required, actually, if you look at it from the legal point of view, because Constitution says that every assembly has a period of 5 years unless sooner dissolved. Unless sooner dissolved. That means it can be dissolved at any time before the expiry of its term of 5 years. That is already provided for in the Constitution. Now, how will you go about it? If you want to introduce one nation, one poll, that is simultaneous elections, which they have been sort of discussing for quite some time. Now the question is, an assembly which has been elected only recently, maybe half a dozen assemblies which have been elected recently.
Like Karnataka, sir. The last election, yes. Go ahead, sir.
They have to go for 5 years. They have to be there in office for 5 years. Of course, the provision is that unless sooner dissolved. Now there should be, what is the process of dissolution of a house? The government recommends dissolution of the house to the governor. And the governor accepts it and dissolves the house. That is the process. The same thing happens to parliament also, the Lok Sabha. Now, the question is, if a state is ruled by a party which is other than the ruling party at the center, and if from here the Home Ministry asks a particular state to dissolve their assembly so that we can move together and we can hold simultaneous elections, suppose they don't accept it. They don't accept it. It is up to them. Parliament cannot, the union government can intervene only through the instrumentality of Article 356. But invocation of 356 can be done only when a certain conditions exist. That means there is a breakdown of the constitutional machinery in a particular state. Only then the center can intervene and dissolve the assembly, not otherwise. At other times, resolution can take place only on the advice of the state cabinet. And that becomes a very difficult thing. Suppose they don't accept it, the request from the center. Now, what law can be made? Here the constitutional provisions are very clear. And the procedure that is resorted to in dissolving a house is very clear. These are all set laws. This legal position is all very set and it is well understood. So what kind of constitutional amendment and what kind of bill, ordinary bill, can be brought about to bring about to conduct simultaneous polls in all the states and the parliament? Now, if a state is dissolved by the president using his power under Article 356, naturally that will be challenged in the Supreme Court. And there are cases where the Supreme Court had struck down the decision and restored the assembly. So that precedent is also there. So it's a very complicated kind of situation. I do not know. In fact, it's not very clear to me how the government wants to go about it and what kind of a law can be brought about it to achieve this object.
Sir, two-third majority is needed for a bill to be cleared. Now, if the bill is cleared, then what? Because what you've told us is a very, very complicated procedure up ahead.
Well, a constitution amendment has to be passed by both the houses with actually a majority of the total membership of the house and two-thirds of the members present and voting. These are the two conditions which need to be fulfilled. And if these two conditions are fulfilled by each house, then the bill is through. So once the bill is through, there are certain areas where the amendment touches those areas. Then, of course, it has to be ratified by half the number of the states in the country. Only after that, it can be presented to the president for his assent. So that is the constitutional provision. Article 368 makes it very clear. It lays down the procedure for amending the constitution. That is it.
But sir, right, go ahead, sir.
It is not actually very clear at this stage what kind of law the government wants to bring to make it possible for conducting the elections simultaneously. In fact, this is not something new. This used to be the case in the 50s. All the elections used to be conducted together, simultaneously, with Parliament and the Assembly. But later in the 60s, towards the end of the 60s, the Parliament had to be dissolved first, before the term expired. And then the whole pattern changed. Then there was the kind of disturbance of political instability in the states, and assemblies had to be dissolved earlier and all that. So the entire pattern had to change. And then the elections were held to the assemblies at different times and to the Lok Sabha at different times, and that kind of thing happened. So it used to be done in the 50s. But at this moment, it is very difficult to bring about that kind of a situation or that kind of a simultaneous hold.
Right, sir, and especially in states which are not government ruled right now, in terms of BJP ruled right now, those states will not agree to dissolve their assemblies, like the state of Himachal Pradesh and Karnataka, which went to elections this year.
And the center can intervene only through 356. But 356 can be imposed only when certain conditions exist. That is, when there is a breakdown of the constitutional machinery in the state. Only then the center can intervene. Otherwise, no. So the assembly can be dissolved only on the advice of the Council of Ministers of the state. That the chief minister and the government and his cabinet has to recommend to the governor that the assembly may be dissolved.
Right, sir. So very complex. But thank you for breaking it down. Appreciate you joining us and giving us your time, PDT Achari, with that.